Day my son changed the locks, I was sitting in a folding chair outside my own front door with a garbage bag at my feet. Not a suitcase, a garbage bag. That detail still gets me. After 61 years of living, after raising that boy through chicken pox and broken bones and one very expensive DUI, I never told his mother about a garbage bag. Like I was something to be thrown out with the rest of the week's mess. My name is Leonard. I'm 63 years old. I spent 34 years working for the county as a civil engineer, got my knees ruined inspecting drainage systems in the rain, and retired with a pension that wasn't going to make anyone jealous but kept the lights on. After my wife Carol passed, pancreatic cancer, 4 years ago this November, I sold our house in Dayton and moved in with my son Caleb and his wife Desiree in Columbus. It made sense at the time. They had a spare room. I had too many memories in that house. And Caleb said, "Dad, we want you here. We want the kids to know their grandfather." I believed him. I shouldn't have believed him. But let me back up, because none of this starts with the locks. It starts with a Saturday morning in March, a gas station off Route 40, and a lottery ticket I almost didn't buy. I don't play the lottery much. Carol used to tease me about it, said I was too practical to believe in luck. But that Saturday I'd stopped for coffee and a car wash, and the line at the register was long, and the man in front of me was buying scratchers, and I don't know why, but something just made me reach over and grab one of those Mega Millions quick picks off the rack. $2. Felt stupid the moment I did it. Drove home, put the ticket on the kitchen counter, forgot about it. The drawing was Wednesday night. I didn't watch. I never watch. I found out Thursday morning when I was eating cereal and my neighbor Phyllis texted me, "Did you see there was a winner in Ohio? Columbus zip code." I looked up the numbers on my phone just to have something to do. I had to look 3 times. I set my spoon down very carefully. I picked a ticket up off the counter where it had been sitting under a grocery list for 4 days. I read the numbers again. I put the ticket in my shirt pocket and sat there for a long time. $89 million. I want to tell you I screamed or cried or called someone. I didn't. I just sat at that kitchen table and thought about Carol and how she always said I needed to loosen up. And I thought, well, honey, you might get a kick out of this. Then I folded the ticket very carefully, put it in an envelope, put the envelope in my copy of The Bridges of Madison County on the bookshelf, the one nobody in this house would ever open, and I went about my day. I didn't tell Caleb. I didn't tell Desiree. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. Here's what you need to understand about Caleb and Desiree. Caleb is my son, and I love him. I want to say that clearly, because everything that comes after is going to make that complicated. He's 36, works in pharmaceutical sales, makes good money. He got my stubbornness and, unfortunately, also got my bad habit of letting the people closest to him do his thinking. Desiree does his thinking. She's not a bad person, or at least she didn't start that way. When they first got married, I thought she was sharp, driven, the kind of woman who gets things done. But somewhere along the way, driven turned into something else. She started keeping score of everything. Who paid for Thanksgiving dinner? Whether my pension deposit came in before the first of the month? Whether I was, as she put it once when she thought I couldn't hear, pulling my weight? I paid them $800 a month for the room. I watched the kids, Milo, who's 8, and Amber, who's 5, 3 afternoons a week, so they didn't need after-school care. I fixed the water heater when it went out in January because the plumber quoted $600 and I knew what was wrong. I mowed the lawn. I put a new roof on the garden shed. But Desiree kept a list somewhere in her head, and according to her math, I was always behind. I noticed things changing in February. Little things. My name wasn't on the grocery order anymore. The cabinet where I kept my coffee had been reorganized and my things were on the bottom shelf. Caleb stopped asking me to watch the game with him on Sundays. Desiree started talking loudly on the phone in the kitchen about having more space and the next chapter. I told myself I was imagining it. I wasn't imagining it. 3 weeks after I found that ticket, I drove to Worthington to see my old friend Raymond. Raymond and I go back to 1987. We worked together at the county for 20 years. He retired before I did, built himself a little tax preparation business, turned it into something real. He's the kind of man who reads every document twice and still sleeps fine at night because he knows exactly what he signed. I didn't tell Raymond about the money right away. We had lunch. We talked about his grandson's little league team. Then I told him. He put his fork down. You verified this 3 times, and nobody knows. Nobody. He looked at me for a long moment. Leonard, how are things at Caleb's house? It wasn't a question. Raymond has known me long enough to read the parts I don't say out loud. I told him everything. The coffee cabinet, the phone calls, the way Desiree had started talking about the spare room like it was already hers, the feeling I'd been getting, the specific, quiet dread of a man who suspects he's about to be discarded. Raymond nodded slowly. He said, "You need to talk to Patricia before you do anything else." Patricia Osei is Raymond's niece. She went to Ohio State for law, works in estate and asset protection now, has an office in Dublin that looks like it belongs to someone who charges $400 an hour. She does charge $400 an hour. She does charge $400 an hour. Raymond called her while I was still sitting there. I met with Patricia the following Tuesday. She asked me about the ticket, about my living situation, about my name on the deed, about any financial agreements I had with Caleb and Desiree. She listened without interrupting. Then she took off her reading glasses and said, "Mr. Leonard, before you claim this, we need to make sure it's structured in a way that protects you completely, because the moment people know, everything changes." I already knew that. I'd been sleeping with a book on a lottery ticket for 3 weeks. Patricia and I spent the next 2 weeks building a wall. A quiet, legal, unshakable wall. The ticket was claimed through a properly established trust, the kind that Ohio law allows for exactly this purpose, to give winners privacy. Patricia's firm handled the filing. My name was protected. The funds went into accounts that had nothing to do with any address on Gaywood Drive. We notarized everything. I signed documents. I read 3 times each. I did exactly what Raymond would have done. And then I went home and waited. I didn't have to wait long. The second Friday in April, I came home from a doctor's appointment, just a routine thing, blood pressure check, and the key didn't work. I stood there on the porch for a moment with my key in my hand, thinking I'd gotten confused, like maybe I grabbed the wrong key. I tried again, nothing. I knocked, no answer. I called Caleb's cell, straight to voicemail. I called the house line, nothing. I sat down in the folding chair. Caleb kept on the porch for the summer and I waited. My garbage bag was already there. I hadn't noticed it until I sat down. One of those big black contractor bags, the kind you use for yard waste. Tied at the top. My things inside. I knew then. I just sat there in the afternoon sun with that bag at my feet, and I knew. Caleb pulled in around 4 o'clock. Desiree was in the passenger seat. They both got out like they'd rehearsed it. Caleb wouldn't look at me directly. He did this thing he's done since he was 12 when he knows he's wrong, looked just slightly to the left of my face. Desiree looked straight at me. She said they'd made a decision, that this arrangement wasn't working for the family anymore, that they needed their space back, that they'd packed my things, she gestured at the garbage bag, and they were happy to help me load up my car. I asked Caleb if he had anything he wanted to say. He looked at the left side of my face. He said it was probably best for everyone. I asked about the $800 I'd already paid for April. Desiree said they'd consider it last month's rent. She said it wasn't like I couldn't afford another place. She said, and I remember this exactly, "You have your pension, Leonard. You'll be fine." I picked up my garbage bag. I put it in my trunk. I drove to Raymond's house and I sat in his living room and I let myself be a little bit broken for exactly one evening. Raymond's wife Cora made me dinner and didn't ask too many questions and gave me the guest room and a towel that smelled like fabric softer. One evening. That's all I allowed. I want to be honest about something because I think people gloss over this part. It hurt. Not the practical part. Not the inconvenience of finding an apartment, which Patricia helped me handle within the week. The thing that hurt was that I kept going back to the moment Caleb said probably best for everyone and trying to find something in his face that said he didn't mean it. Some flicker of the kid who used to fall asleep on my shoulder watching baseball. Some sign that this was Desiree's decision and not really his. I couldn't find it. He chose this. That's the part you have to sit with. Not the garbage bag, not the locks, the choosing. Caleb is a grown man, and he stood on that porch and he chose. I thought about Cara a lot those first few days. She always said I let things go too easily. Said I had a bad habit of smoothing things over when I should have dealt with them. Maybe she was right. Maybe I'd been letting Caleb slide for years and this was just where it landed. I found a furnished apartment in Grandview Heights. 2-bedroom more than I needed, but Patricia said not to downsize too much. We were in a transitional period. I bought some groceries. I set up my coffee maker. I called my sister Donna in Cincinnati and told her the general shape of things without the specifics. She said she was going to drive up and I told her not yet. I was waiting for something. 6 weeks after they changed the locks, Caleb called me. It was a Thursday evening around 7 p.m. I was watching a nature documentary and eating leftover chili. My phone lit up and I looked at his name on the screen for a long time before I answered. He sounded different, not upset exactly. Careful, like he was reading from a script he'd half memorized. He said he wanted me to know that he and Desiree didn't have any hard feelings, that family was family, that the door was open if I wanted to come for dinner sometime and see the kids. I said, "That's very generous, Caleb." He missed the tone or he ignored it. He said, "Mila's been asking about you." I asked if there was something specific he was calling about. The pause was long enough to tell me everything. Then he said, "Desiree was wondering about Mom's things. You said when you moved in that we could have the dining room set. We were just wondering about the timing. Carol's dining room set, solid oak, bought the year Caleb was born. She loved that table." I said, "I'll be in touch, Caleb," and I hung up. I called Patricia the next morning. I said, "I think it's time." Patricia had already prepared everything. All I had to do was say go. The trust claim had been quietly processed. The funds were secured. What came next was the part Patricia called the clarification conversation, and she made very clear that she would be present for it. We set it for a Saturday, 11 in the morning. I called Caleb and told him I was coming over, that I had some things to sort out, and that I was bringing my attorney. He laughed a little. He said, "Your attorney? Dad? We're family." I said, "I know. See you Saturday." When Patricia and I pulled up to the house, Desiree's sister Cara was also there. I hadn't expected that, but Patricia didn't blink. We sat at the kitchen table, Carol's table, which I noticed immediately, and Patricia set a folder down and folded her hands on top of it. Desiree asked what this was about. Patricia said, "We're here to discuss several matters relating to Mr. Leonard's assets and your family's living arrangements with him prior to April." Desiree looked at me. "Assets? Leonard, what is she talking about?" I said. "Let Patricia talk." Patricia talked. She talked about the $800 monthly payments and the labor contributions, the water heater, the roof, the childcare hours, which she had priced at market rate for the Columbus area. She talked about the terms of my residency, which had never been formalized in writing, which meant the eviction, because that's the legal word for what they did. She said it plainly. The eviction had not followed Ohio's required notice period. Desiree started to say something about how I wasn't technically a tenant. Patricia let her finish. Then she said, "Mr. Leonard is owed $4,800 in childcare reimbursement, $600 in appliance repair, $200 in exterior maintenance labor, and the prorated return of his April rent. That's $7,400. We'd like that resolved today." Caleb's face had gone very still. Desiree looked like she was doing math. Then Patricia opened the folder. She explained the trust. She explained what it held. She did not say the full amount out loud, but she slid a single page across the table that had enough numbers on it to make the room go quiet in a very specific way. The way a room goes quiet when something has fundamentally changed, and everyone knows it, and nobody wants to be the first to move. Desiree looked at the page, and she looked at me, then she looked at the page again. She said, "The lottery." I said, "My lottery ticket, yes." Caleb said very quietly, "Dad." I said the ticket was in my shirt pocket when I went to that gas station in March. It has been in my name since the moment I scratched it. Patricia can confirm the documentation if you'd like. Patricia confirmed the documentation. Cara, who had not said a word since we sat down, quietly stood up and went to get herself a glass of water from the kitchen. She stayed in there for a while. Desiree said, "So what do you want, Leonard? Why are you here? To rub it in?" I said, "I'm here because Patricia advised me to close out the financial matters properly. That's all." She said, "And the money? What are you going to do with it?" I said, "That's not really any of your business. But since you asked, I'm establishing a scholarship fund through Carol's alma mater, Clark State, engineering students with financial need. I'm also funding a senior housing initiative in Dayton with an organization that helps people who've been displaced from their homes. I let that land. The rest," I said, "I'm going to use to live the life I should have been living instead of folding myself small enough to fit in your spare room." Caleb called me that evening, not Desiree. Caleb. He didn't ask for anything. He just said, "Dad, I'm sorry." And then he was quiet for a while, and I was quiet, and there was just the sound of the phone between us. I didn't say it was okay. It isn't okay. It isn't okay. Some things you can acknowledge and still not excuse. I said, I know you love your kids, Caleb. I want a relationship with Milo and Amber. We're gonna have to figure out what that looks like now." He said okay. His voice sounded like he was 22 again and had done something he couldn't undo, which, in a way, he had. Desiree did not call. I didn't expect her to. I want to tell you about the apartment I found after Grandview. It's in Clintonville, north side of Columbus. Second floor, corner unit, 2 bedrooms, a little balcony where I put a tomato plant and a chair. There's a Grater's ice cream, a 4-minute walk away. Every Sunday morning I make coffee with the good beans. The ones Carol always said were too expensive. And I sit on that balcony and watch the neighborhood wake up. I'm taking a woodworking class on Tuesday evenings at the rec center. My hands remember things my brain forgot. I'm getting better at it. The scholarship fund announced its first cohort of recipients in September. 8 students. 2 of them came to the small ceremony the college put together, and one of them, a young woman named Destiny, first in her family to go to college, studying civil engineering. She shook my hand and said she wanted to build infrastructure in underserved communities. I told her Carol would have liked that very much. I don't know exactly what happens next with Caleb. We've had a few dinners. Milo told me he missed playing cards with me. I'm teaching him rummy, which is what my father taught me. Small things. We're building something, slowly, on ground that feels uncertain. But we're building. Desiree and I are cordial. That's the word for it. Cordial. It's not warmth, but it's not war either. Some bridges don't get rebuilt, they just stop burning. People ask me sometimes. Not many people know the full story, but the ones who do ask, they want to know if I feel like I won. I think that's the wrong question. I didn't need to win. I needed to stop losing. I needed to stop making myself smaller to fit into a life that was measuring me by the wrong things. Carol used to say that the problem with me was that I confused being needed with being loved, and she wasn't wrong about that either. The garbage bag hurt. The locks hurt. Caleb looking at the left side of my face and choosing his wife's calculation over his father hurt. That's not going to unhurt just because the bank account has more zeros in it now. But I get up every morning in my own home. I drink good coffee on my own balcony. On Tuesday nights I make things with my hands in a room full of strangers who are becoming, slowly, something like friends. That's what I did with the money. I bought the life I should have been living anyway. I've thought a lot about what actually happened in that kitchen the day Patricia slid that paper across the table. People want to call it revenge. I understand why. The story has the shape of revenge, the setup, the fall, the turning of the tables. But sitting there watching Desiree's face go still, I didn't feel anything that resembled satisfaction. What I felt was closer to exhaustion. The specific tiredness of a man who finally stopped pretending a situation was something other than what it was. That's the thing nobody tells you about the moment the truth comes out. It doesn't feel like winning. It feels like putting down something very heavy that you've been carrying for so long you forgot it wasn't supposed to be yours to carry. Caleb made choices. A long string of them, small and then larger, and each one built on the last the way bad decisions always do. Quietly, with justification, until one day you're standing on a porch, handing your father a garbage bag and telling yourself it's probably for the best. That's not a sudden thing. That's a gradual erosion of what a person knows to be right, worn down by proximity to someone who kept score and called it love. I'm not excusing him. I want to be clear about that. Excusing him would be the same mistake I'd been making for years, smoothing things over, letting things slide, choosing the peace of the moment over the honesty the moment needed. Carol called that out in me and she wasn't wrong. There's a version of kindness that's actually just avoidance wearing a friendly face. And I'd been practicing it for decades. What I know now is this: the people who treat you as disposable will almost always show you exactly who they are before the final moment. The signs are rarely hidden. They're just small enough that we talk ourselves out of seeing them. The reorganized cabinet shelf, the phone calls about space, the way Caleb stopped asking me to watch the game, I saw all of it. I chose not to name it. That was my failure, not theirs. The intelligence Raymond showed me, sitting across that lunch table and reading what I hadn't said out loud. That's what I want to carry forward. The wisdom to see clearly and act accordingly, not out of bitterness but out of self-respect. Patricia didn't save me. She equipped me. The difference matters. Nobody can hand you your dignity back. They can only help you build a structure that protects it. The scholarship students at Clark State are going to face moments like this. Maybe not with lottery tickets and garbage bags, but moments where someone underestimates them, writes them off, measures their worth by the wrong scale. What I hope is that they build the kind of quiet, persistent intelligence that doesn't need to announce itself, that they document, prepare, and move with intention, that they understand the difference between reacting and responding. I bought my tomato plant on a Tuesday. I set it on the balcony and I've kept it alive through one full Ohio winter now. Small evidence of consistency. Small proof that the things we tend with patience have a way of surviving. That's the only lesson I have. Tend your life with patience. See clearly. Act when it's time. Put down what was never yours to carry. The rest has a way of working itself out.